Welcome to Soul Night Live, episode number 66. Tonight, my guest is Adam Nitti, and my co host is Stephen Cox.
Hey, Adam.
What's up, guys?
How's it going?
Good.
Good to see you. Thanks for taking time to come chat with us tonight.
Man, thanks so much for your interest in doing this. I'm super excited about it. So.
Oh, absolutely. We're really digging the new record, so we want to know all about it. And
awesome.
Yeah, the world is loud. You know, you're darn right about that. I got to say.
Well, I don't think I realized how true that was going to be until the record was released.
Oh, yeah. You didn't even envision what was coming down the road, did you?
Yeah.
Who could? So tell us how you've been spending your days lately, just around the house and stuff. You do any session work or teaching? Or?
Well, I think like so many others, life's got a new paint job on it, for the last year or so almost. On a sobering note, basically gigging for me, which was my main source of income, prior to things slowing down, that basically just shut down completely at the end of February. So, the shows had disappeared completely from the schedule. Still nothing booked. So, I had to take inventory. What do I have left? As far as, the things that I do. I'm fortunate because I knew a while back that diversification would be kind of a wise thing in the music industry. And what I mean by that is just, being able to do, outside of doing my own music and doing touring for other artists, being able to do things like teaching bass lessons, both in person and through, I have a online lessons website as well. Doing remote sessions for people has become way more popular than it used to be. And so that was another thing I could do. And then as I started looking at, what was available in terms of, income opportunities, I realized, I also have things I can do for other folks that relate to, music tech or things where I can help people in their projects, not necessarily even as a bass player. And so I started sharing with folks that, I also do mixing and mastering, and I'm a super tech nerd, and I've always been into the technology side of it, especially as it relates to, getting great sounds and great mixes and things like that. So yeah, it's honestly been a combination of all those things. And then most recently, I also teach as an adjunct at Belmont University, and I'm there just one day a week. And so I've got some really cool bass students that I teach over there. And that's kind of the only real teaching I'm doing right now, outside of just like one or two other private students here and there. But yeah, that's the long and short of it.
Do you do any session work? Like if somebody had an amazing album they wanted you to play on, could they contact you through your website and maybe get
Absolutely. And I love doing that. There's I've got kind of a queue of tunes right now. There's some colleagues of mine that have kind of thrown some tracks my way, but yeah, they can absolutely, they can email directly at adam@adamnitti.com or just go to my website. They can reach me the same way there. But yeah, I love playing other people's stuff and trying to play things that, if somebody asks me to kind of do my thing, whatever that thing is, I'm happy to do it. But I also love being a chameleon and ultimately just serving the song, whatever it might be. I'm not, some people get the wrong idea. Sometimes you can get pigeonholed. If someone just heard my fusion records, they might make the assumption, oh, this is what this cat does. But the truth is that, most of my living has been made from, meat and potatoes, bass playing and just basic groove stuff. And so I love doing that as well.
Okay. Well, folks, adamnitti.com, right?
Yeah, that's
okay.
It.
Nice.
Nitti,
yes,
not
right.
Y.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, we were checking out the new record, The World is Loud. And yeah, I was saying that it's kind of more of a prog metal-y kind of meets 90s rock kind of thing. I mean, when I listened to it, I thought, well, this has some of the pizzazz that you'd get on a Dream Theater record, something in that ballpark.
Oh, well, I appreciate that.
And but I also, like, vocally and otherwise, you kind of reminded me of like King's X or Little Soundgarden or something.
That's very cool. Wow, it's so cool hearing feedback from people, with it being my first official, lead vocalist release. It's, there's no question that this is a product of my influences, especially growing up, coming up as a player. But my hope is that the album sits in a modern enough context where it just doesn't sound like it's some retro throwback, and that's all it is. But I really wanted to kind of take my influences from when I was a teenager and just really diving so heavily into bass and into music. I was listening to bands like Rush and Yes and Kansas, Led Zeppelin, bands like that. I was so enamored by what I considered to be more of like that flashy or more upfront type of playing that you would hear from these bands, and
Yeah.
all those bands had the respect from their musician counterparts, and then vocally, I love singers like Brad Delp from Boston and Michael McDonald. I mean, you're just
Oh
it
yeah.
runs the gamut, all over the place. And so melodically, I feel like I was influenced by a lot of those folks, but obviously my voice sounds different. So King's X was one of my favorite bands ever, and really still is. So wow, it's really cool to hear you say that,
Oh,
because they were a
absolutely.
huge influence as well.
I had Doug on the show about 6 months ago too. So
Oh,
he
fantastic,
drops
man.
by
I love it.
occasionally, and he's a riot just to sit back.
Yeah.
He'll be sitting there just drinking a glass of wine, just shooting the shit. It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
What a
Definitely.
great band.
Oh gosh, yeah. They have a new one that they've been kind of sitting on because of some sort of contractual BS or
Oh,
something. But I
okay.
think it's basically done. So I mean, we'll get something new eventually. So it's
Yeah,
been like
that's
10
great.
years, I think, almost since they did one.
It's
So
been too long.
yeah, way too long. Well, yeah, you were talking about Rush and some of those bands. I was totally into that kind of stuff too. I'm a big prog fusion guy.
You hit some of his. I know you hit his favorites like in there. He said Kansas and Yes and
Dixie Dregs. It's another one I
Oh
really love.
man.
yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I transcribed um, so many, just kind of like following the lineage of that, and then like Steve Morse band, I was really huge into, and I was obsessed with those bass lines from them, and just
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
He's
there's so much good music.
yeah, Steve is such a great composer. People don't realize that, I mean, he's an amazing guitar player, but then you hear that music and you realize that it all kind of came out of his head, and it's really very sophisticated. I mean, I can't think of any of his peers that write on that level.
I agree completely, and that's one of the things that I love so much about his band was I have this term that I kind of refer to certain people that have sort of like this unmistakable, recognizable identity in their playing. Like I call them a stylist, right? And so Steve Morse is obviously a stylist in terms of his guitar playing. You hear him play four measures, you know who it is.
Oh yeah,
But his
absolutely.
compositions are the same way. You can hear his compositional nature, and it's so beautifully composed. It's you could totally see how a classical music aficionado would appreciate his music. A jazz aficionado would appreciate a rock, metal. It's super deep, and absolutely was a huge influence on me. That I don't know if you're familiar with the album, The Introduction.
Oh
Uh,
sure, his first solo with Rod Morgenstein and Jerry Peak.
yeah, and Jerry Peak, and
Yeah,
um, I'm from Atlanta, and Jerry was in Atlanta, and
sure. Yeah,
got to
I
meet him.
remember he played with the group. Remember the Pruitt Davis group he played with about 10
Yeah,
years
I
ago?
played. I played with a later version of that band.
Fucking
I'm on
awesome.
two of their. I'm on two of
Yeah,
their albums.
wonderful stuff.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So,
Rest in peace, Rick.
yeah, no kidding. But yeah, so that stuff I was diving into big time is a huge influence.
Awesome. I love that stuff too. I mean, I love great pop music too. I mean, I love Steely Dan as much as I love Yes. So,
Yeah, oh,
okay,
yeah.
it's all good, and great power pop too, and big stuff like anything from the Beach Boys to like Jellyfish. Anything that's really just got amazing hooks and great production. Big
Yeah.
sucker for all that. So tell us about the new record, and was it like a conscious decision to make something a little more in the prog arena, or was it just kind of a natural evolution for you?
Yeah, I mean, my wife could tell you, this was as I was writing. and as typically is the case with my albums, you know, I have my plans for release and completion, and then, you know, what actually happens is two different things. And so, you know, there's a couple years worth of writing behind this record, and I just, you know, I'd already done 5, you know, instrumental jazz rock fusion, or however people want to categorize that, albums. And I was listening. We have a pretty big vinyl collection at home, and I've been just diving into the nostalgia of all these old records. You know, we rebought so many of these old albums that we had back in the day, and just getting back into the, you know, some of these old records, like, you know, Rush like pre 81, you know, everything before Signals, and just diving into that. And then, you know, like these old Yes albums, and just getting into all this stuff again, just enjoying it, hearing it with new, fresh ears, more mature ears. And that's what I was listening to so much for enjoyment. And I was like, man, my heart is really into the idea of you know, doing sort of like an Adam Nitti take on this approach to music. And as I started writing, I realized, you know, my traditional method for writing, which usually involves me simultaneously at the keyboards and with the bass guitar in my hands, just kind of working things out harmonically and melodically, I realized that I had to change my approach to writing. So Ibanez, who I've been affiliated with for a while now, they were kind enough a while back to help me out with getting a guitar. So I had this guitar, this really cool sort of studio setup guitar. It's really versatile. It's got a bunch of different tones you can get out of it. I made this conscious, crazy, ambitious effort to try and write from the guitar perspective, even though I'm not a guitar player by trade. I don't have any significant experience playing live or recording guitar other than stabbing out chords. And this really crazy evolution started to happen where, you know, I was wanting to play things and record things that I was hearing in my head. And through the process of searching out these parts, my not being a guitarist kind of helped me not to have any preconceived notions or muscle memory about how this is going to go. You know, like playing a certain riff, it was literally just, I was taking the inspiration of what I was hearing and figuring out how I was going to play it on guitar. Well, you know, my original plans, just like with my past records, I was like, okay, I'll get the scratch guitar down, I'll write with it, but I'll get the real guitar players to lay down the tracks. It was the same plan with the vocals. I was, you know, laying scratch vocals down. I'll get the real singers to come in. I had handpicked all these singers that I wanted to, the guitar players I wanted to play on the album. Well, after months and months of pre-production work, it was like the guitar parts started to sound more put together and more tight, and I couldn't help but improve because I was working so hard at these parts. And so I got them to this pre-production state, and I started sharing these parts with a couple of my guitar player colleagues who I really trust. And they shocked me by saying, man, I think I would just leave this the way it is. I said, you're kidding. You know, this is just me. I'm kind of hacking. They're like, no, it sounds good. And I was like, really? Yeah, really. And so that encouraged me and gave me, you know, confidence. And I was like, okay. And so with the guitar stuff, I ended up just getting guitar players to guest on most of the guitar solos. I even played a couple of the guitar solos myself.
Okay, who'd you have guest?
So Scott Bernard, one of my great friends who I tour with Kenny Loggins, he's on a bunch of the solos. D. Rosario, guitar player who now lives in Germany, I played in a funk band with called Beehive for many years. He's on a tune. One of my favorite guitarists, Marcos Fogli, he's on a track, and I think that's it. And I did the overwhelming majority of all the rhythm parts. And there's only one song I didn't play rhythm guitar on, and that was this song called Truth Seeker, which was a reinvention of an earlier version of that song.
Very cool. And where's the best place to get The World Is Loud?
So you can go to my website, adamnitti.com, or you can just go to theworldisloud.com. And you can, we've got a handful of these pre-release packages that we did, which were kind of cool. We wanted to have sort of like the nostalgic retro theme, and you can buy a CD, and I sign the CD, and then you also get a button, like a little album cover button and a sticker. We've got those are almost gone, but we have some of those left, and you can still order the CD, just the CD itself from there. And then all the online retailers and iTunes, Apple Music, it's at Amazon. Yeah, pretty much most of the places that you buy your music, it's available at.
Excellent. Well, we're going to dig in a little deeper into the album here in a
Cool.
few minutes. Steven's got some specific questions about different tracks.
Absolutely.
And you see, are you watching the chat room, Steven? I see a few questions
I
popping
am.
up
I want to say something real quick.
please
Imra Kotan,
Imra,
he says hey, and he said he got to play with you at a graduate recital back in the day or something. So that's pretty cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah, Imra says hey.
Tuning in.
Have you seen what he's been up to lately? He's been kind of, or before the lockdown and everything, he's been like a movie star, kind of in TV shows and doing all sorts of stuff in addition to drumming.
Where have I been?
Yeah, and he sent some really cool videos recently where Imra plays everything. And,
wow.
Yeah, so those
really
are fun.
awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, look those up because one of my favorite drummers here in Atlanta.
Gosh, I absolutely will. That's fantastic. Congrats, Emma. That's awesome.
Very cool. And our friend Adrian says, ask Adam about jamming with Jeff Sipe at the Little 5 Points pub back in the late 90s.
Oh, wow. Okay, so yeah, that takes me back. Another one of my favorite drummers of all time, Jeff Sipe from Aquarium Rescue Unit. Yeah, ridiculous player. So Little 5 Points pub. So I'm not going to remember, so forgive me. Is it Adrian?
Yes.
Adrian may have to remind me what the configuration was, but it may have been a trio-based thing with myself, Jeff, and a guitar player named Steve Cunningham.
Oh, Steve!
Of course,
nice.
we love Steve.
Yeah,
Awesome.
that was one of the trios that we did for a while. It was really cool. We did complete improvised stuff from beginning to end, and some nights were better than others, but we had a blast, and that was a tremendous period of growth for well, I speak for myself, for me, in terms of just building something from nothing. And both of those musicians, they're on just such a massively high level. Man, I looked so forward to playing those shows. Sometimes we would have big crowds, sometimes they would be small, but the music was always an adventure. It was never the same thing twice. So if that's the same group, that's what we were doing. Those were some incredible days. I still have some bootlegs on DAT from a bunch of those shows that I need to release or something, because there's some cool moments on there.
Were you playing with Jimmy Herring down there as well?
Yeah, so Jimmy, I actually toured with for a while with a band called the Justice League, and that was Jimmy, T. Lavitz, and Richie Hayward, God rest their soul.
Yeah, I saw a clip of this. I just ran across it yesterday as I was digging around, and I'd never really heard about that lineup. How did that come together, and how long did it last?
So Bobby Vega was originally playing bass with that particular band, and I forget what the circumstances were. It's been so long. You know how it is. There's personnel changes that happen over time. But yeah, I came in after Bobby, and we right before a tour that we did. And it was mostly East Coast, up and down the East Coast. I think we did some more interior U.S. stuff as well. We just kind of, we were just driving around playing these shows in a lot of college towns and stuff like that.
And what was your material like? Was it all improv, or did you do, like, say, some Dregs covers and other fusion things?
We did Dregs covers. We did some of, I believe, we did a couple of T's originals. We did a couple of my originals.
I think we found a video of one of
Yeah,
your originals.
one of
Oh,
your originals.
cool. That's amazing.
Yeah.
What was that called? Swamp Diddy?
Swamp Diddy, yeah.
Yeah, is that it?
That's-
Yeah, yeah.
That is so cool that you know about that. See, that was before, that was really before like the massive YouTube revolution. So there was a lot more audio floating around of that stuff than there was video.
Right.
So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's really dark and very
yeah.
camcordery,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's about 6 minutes of that. It's out there.
Wow, that's
Okay.
cool. I guess I need to look that up
Yeah,
too.
I'll send it to you. Yeah,
Please do.
definitely.
Yeah.
It was cool stuff. Maybe there's more out there. I figured whatever it was, they probably filmed the whole show because it wasn't like you back now where you just film a song with your phone. If you
Right.
brought a friggin' camera to the show, you filmed the whole
Yeah,
thing.
you were committed.
Yeah, you really were.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, that was an amazing experience. That was, again, just highest level musicianship. I mean, those guys are amazing.
Great stuff. Absolutely.
So sweet, nice people too. I hate that Richie and T are no longer around.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, they left us a lot of great stuff to remember them by. So
Yeah, they did.
more than some folks. So thank you.
Yeah. There's a massive legacy of their music left behind, which is wonderful.
Absolutely. Well, Stephen, what else you got?
I also got about shoot, I'm all scattered over here. If we could talk about bass playing or just album stuff, probably just stick with
Let's
the
talk more about the album, I guess. You had
album.
some different songs you wanted to ask about, right?
Yeah, I had like kind of a last minute thing. I know it was almost a complete departure from the jazz sound, like even the jazz vocabulary. I'd say you kind of just delved off, but then you kind of brought it back just right at the end. I believe it was on the last track. You just threw in kind of a solo that had a little more of that vibe in there.
Yeah.
That was cool. I really like that, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the tune Truth Seeker.
Truth Seeker. Yeah.
Yeah, that song was done twice. The first time, like there's two versions of that song. The original version of that song was actually stepping even more so in sort of like the folk jazz sort of direction, had a completely different approach to the rhythm section. And I don't know if there's any PreSonus Studio One users out there, but when Studio One version 4 came out, that song was one of the feature songs that comes with the software, that you can actually look at the mix, exactly how it was done, all the effects and everything, and then you could deconstruct it and play with it yourself. And we got to fly to Baton Rouge to the PreSonus studios and record it there. And they actually videoed that whole thing, and it was really, really cool. And then when I was writing for this record, I always loved the melody of that tune. And when I was picking the final tunes for the album, I thought, man, that melody would probably sit well with the rest of these tunes. And so I kind of reinvented it for the project. And like you said, it's really, that is the most, out of all the tunes on the record, that's the one that does have like a pretty in your face 6-string bass guitar solo. It's definitely got some more momentum to it. But I appreciate your kind words regarding that.
And did you do a single sweep on this album? Because that was one thing that I'm trying to remember. Are you kind of departing from that, or I can't even remember if there was. There weren't as many. If there were.
No, you know what? I've just never even thought about that until you just asked that. No, I don't think there is a single sweep on there.
I was just wondering if it was on purpose. Like you don't want to be known as the sweep guy or something. You're so good at them, though.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that's a great question. The honest truth is that I guess that never came to my mind in the inspiration of these songs. It just didn't seem to be a part of the evolution of the tunes. So yeah, I mean, there's that's really cool that you would even notice that, because it is interesting. You can look back at different albums, and at least for me, like there's certain albums where I had been working for a long period of time as a bass player on very specific techniques. And the way that I try to really get a handle on techniques and try to master them is I make myself try to make something musical or write a tune using the technique instead of just playing exercises up and down. And I'd done that for several records prior. And yeah, with this one, there wasn't anything like new per se, technically, that I was doing. It was just more kind of capturing what I do and hopefully making it fit the vibe,
Awesome. And I had one other question about a song. I noticed you had some fretless bass on, I believe it was the Locust.
That's right. Yeah.
And which fretless bass were you using
So
for that?
that's I have a couple signature basses with Ibanez, and one of those is a 5 string, and it's a 5 string fretted bass. It's set up kind of like a J configuration. It's part of their Sound Gear series, and I have a one other fretless bass in my bass arsenal, but I wanted something with a little different tone, and Ibanez was kind enough to, they built me this fretless version of that 5 string fretted bass.
Okay, so
So it's essentially, it's the exact same instrument, same electronics, same dimensions, same wood and everything, but it's, you know, it's a fretless neck, and that's what I used on that. So I love it because it's got a maple board on it, and it's got like this really kind of, it's warm, but it's bright at the same time. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's got a unique tone to it, and I was so excited to have it for this album because I wanted to be able to use it on that song.
is that a one-off bass, or are they kind of?
Yeah, there's only one in existence right now.
Okay.
It's funny because I've had lots of people ask me about that. You know, if they were going to release that, it would probably, just like with the other bases, it would probably require a lot of people, you know, contacting them. Hey, can I get this? But there's no plans to release it right now. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. If the world turns fretless, maybe it'll change.
Hey, that sounds like a good name for your next record.
The world turns fretless.
Yeah, right.
Like it.
You call it "Slippery Slope" will be your opening song.
Mm.
That's it.
Speaking of the Ibanezes, I know we've been talking a lot about that. How did you get affiliated with them? Like, how did that start?
So I was kind of, you know, between affiliations, if you will. I had a really great relationship with more of like a smaller boutique builder before them, and
Warrior.
just decided, yeah, exactly. And I decided I wanted to move in just a little bit different direction, and just, you know, sometimes I'm very much like a creature of habit and comfort, but I've been going in the same direction for so long. I just decided I was going to kind of make a departure with some of my gear and just, you know, just go different. I was hearing something a little bit different in my head, and it was Gerald Veasley, the bass player Gerald Veasley, who's now a good friend of mine I've known for years. He's been an Ibanez artist for decades. And when I was kind of just talking to different people and just meeting different people at companies, he said, man, you might want to speak to them, and because they'd probably be interested in working with you. And so he connected me with his rep, and we had a really great conversation on the phone. I was speaking to someone that was based in their out of their Hollywood custom shop, and we hit it off. They were one of the things that was really exciting, that kind of moved them to sort of like the you know, the forefront of my attention at the time, was they were all about the idea of building some custom instruments for me. And that was a big deal because a lot of companies don't want to do that because people will see you playing these one-off instruments that they can't get. And so they feel like, you know, some companies just aren't really keen on that. They want you playing instruments that people can go out and buy. So so they built me these two prototypes of 6-string and the 5-string bass. The 6-string was first. And so I already, you know, I was working with them, but after I'd played the 6-string for about a year, they came to me and said, you know, we've gotten a lot of inquiries about this bass. And I didn't even know about this. Apparently people were writing in, because the specs on my 6-string bass were very different from the overwhelming majority of instruments. Certainly everything else in the
string spacing, right? You have almost like 4-string style spacing.
Yeah. So it's an 18 millimeter spacing, and for an Ibanez sound gear bass, that was definitely wider. And there were players out there that was a deal breaker for them with Ibanez basses. So I'd go and I'd play, you know, bass clinics, or people would check out my bass and they would ask me, you know, they'd play it and they'd go, oh man, this feels great. And what's the string spacing? And that was one of the things that was, you know, for me also, that was like a big deal to have that. Make a long story short, they got enough interest where the fact, the powers that be were like, this would be cool to do as a signature instrument because it does kind of stand apart. And so that's what started that. And then we did relative, 6-string is kind of a niche market of a niche already. So in that world, the bass did pretty well in terms of numbers and interest, and that formed the momentum for them to have the interest in doing the 5-string, which of course, as you would guess, is actually sold more because it's a 5-string and there's more people playing 5 strings than 6 strings. But they're two tools I use just as much as the other. It's just in different contexts. I love them both for different reasons.
Do you ever just break down and play a Fender Jazz?
I have more of those in my bass collection than anything else, as a matter of fact. So
Nice.
that's when it comes to as a collector, that's one of my favorite instruments. And Ibanez they're great because they know that because of what I do as a studio musician, I'm not going to necessarily be able to use like my one signature bass on every single type of session and every single type of context.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
And they've always understood that. And so, it's not like I had to stop using some of my other, instruments where I needed to do that. Like I've had artists request, very specific bass sounds, like they want to hear like a P bass tone specifically on this or whatever the case may be. So I still get to play those instruments, which is wonderful. But one thing is really cool is I was able to find, I've been looking for one for years. I found on a website, an auction site a few years back, it was an original 4-string. It was an Ibanez J bass that, it was mint condition, and I bought it. I got it for a pretty decent deal. And so I've got that now as well, which is cool because I've got it's a 1976 and it's all original. And that bass it looks really cool with the 5 and the 6, it's fun to have that too.
Remember that one they had in the 80s? I think it was called the Art Star. Remember that? Maybe that was the guitar. Maybe there was a bass version. What was that called?
Yeah, it's the Roadstar, I think.
Roadstar, yeah.
Yeah, it was a great bass.
Those are you don't see a lot of those, but a friend of mine has one, and
yeah, I have it
really
well.
well.
I go nuts down the rabbit hole. I mean, and I already have. My wife is watching. Maybe I shouldn't add them up, but I have an irresponsible number of bass guitars, is what I like to say. I've collected them over the years, and it'd be so easy for me. I have to stay off of sites, like eBay and Reverb, because I'll see something, oh man, that's really cool. Oh, I'd love to have that. And I'm like, oh no, I got to back off. It's getting ridiculous. So.
Yeah, I did that and bought a Warrior. That's what ended up happening. That Warrior let you play that one time.
Oh yeah.
Cool, by the way, switching and getting to play your signature, and that felt really good. Yeah, by the way.
Well, I have all that stuff. I mean, they're like, we don't have kids, so like the basses are kind of the kids, I guess, at this point.
Yeah,
it works.
All right. Well, is anybody feeling pregnant about now?
Right.
Hey, honey, there's another one coming.
Surprise.
No. Just kidding.
Congratulations. It's a Ford.
Speaking of the basses, while we're talking about that, I thought I heard somewhere that there was a story behind you coming up with needing a jazz bass sounding kind of thing for maybe a certain gig, or was it just random with the red bass?
As far as the evolution of the red bass, yeah. Well, so that, I mean, if you look at the specs, that instrument, it's a J configuration, and the pickups are placed where they would be like in a mid 70s. The woods that it's made out of, it's got an ash body and a maple neck and a maple board, and which was a real popular configuration for not all but a lot of the J's, depending on the particular model. But the six string is not, as I said, it's not something that I use in every single context. It's kind of like a flagship instrument for me, and certainly something that I've used all the time with my, you know, original instrumental music, because it's a perfect instrument for that. But for tours and things like that with other artists, my favorite all around configuration is a 5-string because of its versatility. And a lot of the artists that I've toured with, even if a lot of the original tracks were recorded on a 4-string bass, you know, you'll get these vocalists that want to down tune certain things, you know, during the set, and just to kind of, you know, give them a little bit of a break, and, you know, for their endurance. And so it's nice to have a 5-string, so you don't have to retune and stuff like that. So that was my reasoning for it. I knew a J configuration would give me a more sort of traditional tone that would also sort of more mimic what I was hearing on these artists, you know, albums. And so that's where kind of that came from. And then we did our own with, it's the Bartolini electronic circuit that's in there. We kind of did our own little hybrid spin on things, and it's, you know, it's an active instrument categorically, but it also has, there's a passive buffer circuit in it as well. So it's basically like, it's an active instrument that has the same exact kind of tone control that you would have on an old J or P. So it's nice because you can tone shape it and tame it, you know, to where it sounds more passive in nature. Which is, you know, it's a different tonal product than if you just had a passive mode on it. And I have instruments like that too, where they have just a passive mode. But I mean, I don't want to bore the audience. You know, I can nerd out all day on that stuff. But yeah, that's where that came from. I was wanting an instrument that I could use in those contexts.
Cool.
Excellent. All righty. Well, thanks for filling us in. They're beautiful. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
And Ibanez seems to like them. They put them on the outside of the booth at NAMM. I walked right by. It's like, oh, there are his basses right there.
Yeah.
When you're,
gosh, that was, I mean, you know, I was like a little kid when I got to go to NAMM when it was introduced. Just seeing it up on there was, I mean, it was so exciting, and they've been so amazing and supportive with the instruments, and, you know, I think I'm the only artist on the roster that actually has 2 completely different spec instruments, you know, as part of the catalog, and that's just a testament to their openness, you know, because I play both instruments all the time, and their philosophy is, you know, they want to offer what it is you're actually playing, and the prototypes that were originally built, I don't gig with those. Like those are kept in the studio. I use the same exact instruments, you know, nothing's modified, the exact same instruments that you would order from Sweetwater or any other store like that. And they're fantastic. I can't say enough about them.
Excellent. Well, it's a stocking stuffer for every bass player out
That's right. Every bass player
with a budget.
Yeah, I know. It'd be amazing if they, you know, I realize that, of course, I have nothing to do with the pricing of these instruments,
right?
But, you know, that, of course, you know, they're not cheap, but they're not as expensive as some others, and you know, you want to be able to kind of meet everybody where they're at, but you know,
right. You got to have like a beginner series or something where it's kind of like the same pickup placement, but maybe not the same. You know, as far as like the red one, as far as the jazz kind of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe you could do something like that with them or something.
Yeah. That would definitely be cool.
So we've had a few questions in the chat room alluding to this. So I want to talk about you setting sail with the 2 kings of yacht rock. I don't necessarily work with them at the same time, but they've been known to work together and collaborate quite a bit. So I guess we'll start with Kenny Loggins. You know, gosh, I remember when This Is It was new and it was on the radio, and I thought, this is such a great song. I mean, it's
still one of my favorite songs.
Absolutely timeless. Just the mood, the way it's produced and stuff. Just it's awesome. And then I'm All Right, another amazing one. You know, great 12-string kind of tune. Heart to Heart. Oh man, that's another great one. Did you play that one live with him?
Yeah, all
Uh,
three of those.
oh yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. How did you come to work with him, and what year was
so you know, I've been I've been very blessed to have, you know, musical circles are interesting. You know, like you maybe you hang in this particular circle here, but the outer edge of this circle intersects with this circle over here. So you've got this sort of like this common gene pool between these two separate circles, and you know, there's all sorts of these, you know, these converging circles that sort of share space. And I've just been really fortunate over the years to have been in some musical situations where I either cultivate friendships with people who end up being referrers for me, you know, for certain gigs, or put in a good word, or I have an opportunity to audition as a result of hearing about this from another circle that I was involved with. So with Kenny Loggins, there's two players that that had been playing with him that I was playing with prior in different circumstances, and one was the guitarist I mentioned before, Scott Bernard, and one of the greatest guitar players ever. He's so great. Um, he's been playing with Kenny for, I think this would be his 11th year. And then Scott Sheriff, who's a keyboard player that I work with in another band called Live from Ventura Boulevard. I also toured with him with Stephen Curtis Chapman when I first moved to Nashville. Scott also played in Kenny's band for many years prior as well. So I entered the picture as a substitute on their referral. So when the bass player at the time wasn't available, I eventually was able to kind of get into that. You know, I got brought into that conversation. I had opportunity to begin as a sub, and then that eventually grew into the, you know, the main bass chair position. But I never had to audition or anything. My first gig with Kenny was me flying out to Colorado, and this kind of ties into your intro to this. I never rehearsed with the band before. Fly to Colorado, and my first time playing with everybody is at sound check. I've already learned the set. I've learned all the vocal stuff that I'm supposed to learn, and I play through the majority of the set with the band for Kenny, and then also that same first night I played with Michael McDonald and for his set, and I had to know his stuff as well, those vocal parts as well. So so it's, you know, it's one of my, you know, it's one of the stories that's fun to tell, and you know, in one hand it's like it's encouraging to know that people had enough trust in me, you know, to bring me out there into that situation. They weren't going to worry about it. But you know, of course, there's going to be some nervousness and anxiety that goes with meeting people for the first time, and you know, you want them to like you, and you want them to like the way you sound. And so you know, I remember being on stage on that show, and at one point the adrenaline had built up so much for the show. I was so excited because you got to realize, like, growing up listening to music, I mean, these songs, like Sean was just talking about, I mean, I loved these songs. I loved these vocal melodies. I loved these singers and the musicians that played with them. And it was a part of my musical upbringing. So this surrealness of it all was so overwhelming that, like, halfway through Kenny's set, I felt like I was gonna have a panic attack. My body started feeling like really, really hot, and I'm like, am I gonna pass out? You know, I didn't know what was going on. It was just one of those, like, suddenly physically I felt weird, but it passed, thank goodness. But that was the anticipation, the psych up, the getting through the first set and the first several songs of the second set, and then my body kind of relaxing and coming down, going, hey, this is great. And then my body going, whoa, what do I do? And then it was like, all of a sudden I was in this state of what's going to happen, me worrying if I'm going to pass out. But it's that was how excited I was as an adult that it had already been playing for so many years. I felt like a little kid again. I mean, it was such a blessing in so many ways. And it's really, I have to say, it's been tough for me during this whole pandemic thing, because I have enjoyed working with Kenny so much, and the whole band. And it's been a great gig. I've learned so much from it, and it's just a bummer, not being able to do these shows,
No doubt. So, do you know the story behind the bass line for Footloose?
You probably know more than I do. I've
I'll
talked
tell you
some with
what
Kenny about it.
I'll tell you what I think it is.
Okay.
As I have been told, it's Nathan East on bass.
Right.
And the way it's mixed, it's almost kind of hard to discern how cool this bass line is.
I agree 100%.
There's a lot more going on there than people realize. Steven has to play it in a wedding.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. That one's it's like I add a little bit to it every time I play it because I don't have all of it.
If I'm not mistaken, that's what Nathan did, because I heard that it was like new and they tried it at sound checks like the year before they recorded it. So every sound check he'd get, just maybe out of boredom or whatever, he'd add a little more to it. So when they finally got to the studio and recorded it, it was what you hear now rather than something half as easy.
Yeah, that sounds right. And that is actually where the guitar unison for that part came from as well. So it's interesting. A lot of times the writing process will have the bass player doing the unison of what the guitar player is doing, and this came from the other direction, which I think is awesome.
Yes.
And it was another thing that was super exciting is I got to talk with Nathan after I'd gotten the gig. I got to chat with Nathan for a short time on the phone. I was telling him about it. He's like, "Oh man, tell Kenny hi," and then we were just kind of talking about the tune and whatever. It was just, Nathan's of course is one of my bass idols as well. So getting to, even though I wasn't there, in the evolution of all that stuff, just kind of being a part of that, the legacy of that song. I mean, that was super exciting as well. So
I'll tell you a funny story. I'm part of a collective here along with my friend Adrian, where we do these tribute nights every month. We had a nice little theater that we put them on at, and different themes. Like one night we did Peter Gabriel versus Phil Collins.
Oh, cool!
All that cool, stuff from them. And another night we decided to do Kenny Loggins versus Michael McDonald. So we had an excuse to play all of those great songs. And somebody asked me later, there's like, well, who won? And it's like, it's kind of a tie, but I would say that the Loggins material probably was more fun in a live setting, and the McDonald material was more satisfying from a harmonic perspective.
Sure. I could see that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because Michael's doesn't have a Footloose in his catalog that I know. So
nothing with that kind of energy. That's a lot of energy.
Yeah.
It's the and I have to add to that. I don't think, what you're saying, I totally get. I didn't realize how harmonically deep Kenny's stuff was until I had to start learning.
Well, actually, yeah, it is. I mean,
and it's deceptively complex. And me and Scott Bernard, we've talked about this many times before. I mean, I've gotten to do some pretty challenging gigs, especially like in the jazz and fusion world before, that have just made me sweat bullets. But the Kenny gig was the hardest gig to learn and get to know. Because it was so many of the arrangements were so unpredictable, because you could have the nuance of a change that only happens in the second verse, but doesn't happen in the first and the third or whatever. Like there's all these, or a cool musical thing that happens where the harmony changes, or there's a short bar that happens. I mean, it's like you have to memorize the stuff. And the other part of it that makes it so challenging is that to be in Kenny's band, you have to be able to sing, and doing the vocal stuff along with some of the complexity of the bass parts. And you mentioned Footloose. I mean, that was a bear to get down, because we're doing a ton of singing on that tune, the background vocals.
Oh yeah.
And playing that bass line as active and specific as it is, and singing all the parts at the same time. I mean, there's a lot of like jockeying going on between like making sure your hands are in the right place. And so I'm doing a lot of like on the mic using peripheral vision making sure that my hand is poised. And I mean, it's people, a lot of people don't realize, like what's going on in my head. It's pretty spastic, but,
Well, yeah,
but it's so satisfying once you have it.
yeah, and hats off to singing bass players. That's the whole pat your head and rub your belly
Yeah.
thing to the
Yeah.
10th degree. Guitar players have it easy in comparison. Geddy Lee always made me marvel at some
Oh
of the
man,
things
what
he
a,
would
what a master of that,
sing
for
and play
sure.
at one time. It's just like, wow.
Well, and see now, here I am. Be careful what you shoot for or wish for. And I've got this record. It's like, well, when I go out and tour this record, now I've got to sing these parts and play these bass parts. And okay, yeah, I've got a lot of experience doing it, but it's not going to be any easier because it's my stuff. It's going to be, I'm going to be starting over again. But yeah, my prayer is it doesn't take me long as some of these other gigs, because it's music that I was able to hear in my mind. But there's a few songs on the record that are already giving me fits, and I haven't even started yet thinking about like specifically the rhythm of the melody and the range of the melody coupled with what's happening on the bass that might be really, really frenetic. So I want to be like a perfectionist, and I don't want to have to simplify any parts, to pull them off live. So I'll probably be working a little while. But hey, that's what a pandemic is for, right? We've got some
Right,
time.
you got all the time to
Sure.
hopefully do that.
Oh my gosh.
A couple more Kenny questions. You played some really big gigs with him. I'm trying to remember. I feel like I saw like you guys did the 4th of July at Washington D.C. or something on that par. Am I right? Was that you there? Or am I thinking of something?
That particular gig may not have been me. Yeah, it depends how far back you go, because when I first got into the band, they were running both like a 4-piece configuration and a 5-piece configuration. There was actually a different bass player in each one of those. So some of those shows I did and some of those shows I didn't, depending on what you're referring to.
Okay. Have you played with Triss since he came back?
Yes.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Triss played with Chicago for
Triss is one of my favorite people in the world.
Awesome. And of course, he was in Kenny's band, back in the day. I don't know if anybody's heard the album Kenny Loggins Alive, the big double album from 1979. Smoking band, even back then, And the way he takes some of those songs, like the ones he wrote with Michael McDonald, and does his own thing. Like, What a Fool Believes. He really does his own way, And I like it equally well, actually. So.
Yeah, that's a killer arrangement.
What are some other cool bass lines that you get to play that come to mind besides Footloose? Any favorites?
This Is It is a great one. For sure. It's not necessarily one of the more active or challenging tunes, but Angry Eyes, which is older Loggins and Messina tune.
Mm-hmm.
We do it as a real like heavy rocker live, and that one's got it actually has a bass solo in it, meaning that there's a very recognizable bass part that happens where it's just by itself and like a hi-hat keeping time, and that's a lot of fun to play.
You do Junkaroo Holiday?
No, that's not.
That had a cool bass break in it. Really funky, big old Yamaha sound. Seemed like everybody had one of those Yamahas about 1980. Paul McCartney, a lot of folks, and they're great. It's hard to find them nowadays. They have really.
It's crazy because the set is, the set is usually like 90 minutes long, or a little bit longer, and every song is a hit. He's got so many hits. A lot of people know him just as the soundtrack king, but my gosh, the library goes so deep. The duet with Stevie Nicks, good grief, Whenever I Call You Friend.
Right. I used to think he said 3 drunk birds on a Saturday night. That's what I called that song for years.
That song is one of my favorites to play for some reason. It's just that's a great one too.
Yeah. Great one. Very cool. Yeah. He's had a lot of cool collaborations, It's not just with Michael McDonald. So how did you come play with Michael? Was it kind of around the same time, or?
Well, it was exactly that story I was
Oh,
telling
you
earlier.
had to prep for both of them. That's amazing.
Yeah,
You got to
yeah,
be in both at the same time.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was an interesting first night, but it was a night to remember for
You
sure.
know, it's such great sophisticated music, and Kenny's as well. You know, a lot of people are, asked, they're like, I love Steely Dan. What's like Steely Dan? And it's like, it's a pretty short list, but I'd have to say anything Michael McDonald did with the Doobies or without is
Yeah,
probably about as close as you're going to. And, he worked with those guys, but I
yeah.
can't help but think that he didn't learn all those chords just playing pretzel logic with them. I would like to think,
Right, right. Yeah,
you know,
there is again, like the harmonic depth of that stuff is amazing. And those two vocalists in particular, I mean, just the part of the genius is how the melody is interwoven with that in ways that just sound like they couldn't be any other way. I mean, it's a gift to be able to write music that way.
sure. So, what are your favorites to play with Michael?
Well, that gig we did, I love Keep Forgetting. Like that's maybe one of my all-time favorite tunes.
It's a lot
Um,
of fun.
I don't think I got to do that at that gig though. Let's see, what do we do? Is the name Minute by Minute was
Oh, that's
one
great.
that
That
I
fast running
absolutely love.
octave line. That's so cool.
Oh man, it's so cool. Um, the song Freedom, what's the title?
Oh, Sweet Freedom.
Sweet Freedom, thank you.
I love that
Sweet
tune.
Freedom,
Man,
great tune.
that's like the last great yacht rock song.
Yeah,
By that time, yacht rock had pretty much petered out, but it
yeah,
was like the one last salvo, I think.
yeah,
Intentional or not, it just seems that way in hindsight.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, man, that music, isn't it funny how that trailing legacy is it's such a huge thing. There's um you know what, cruises that are based on that music that people go
Oh,
out
yeah,
on for vacation. There's yacht rock stations on you know Spotify and AccuRadio and all these other things.
you
It's
know,
it's
I think it's been a good thing for all the artists though, because it's brought this music to generations that wouldn't have heard it otherwise. Like
Yeah.
I had a Burley Drummond from Ambrosia on, gosh, back in
Oh,
the summer.
cool. Yeah.
And I said, "How do you feel about the yacht rock tag?" He's like, "We love it. We do these cruises, and there's people in their 20s singing every word that never would have heard us otherwise. So call it what you want. And it's so weird how a genre became defined by a parody of it. You know,
It's so yeah. You
yeah,
can't
yeah.
write
In
that
case
stuff.
anybody doesn't know, that there's a series, a 12-part series on called Yacht Rock from back in the 2000s. And it became legendary, and
Yeah.
out of it spawned a whole tag for this genre that didn't really have a name. Before that, I would have called it soft rock, probably
Yeah.
70s soft
Isn't it
rock.
isn't it funny how certain genres or certain time periods or decades, I should say, they start like they go through this life cycle of it's the present time, then 20 years goes by and it's like corny, and then it cycles into being ironically cool and
Right.
then becomes really cool again. It's
Yeah.
just the strangest thing. And I've got enough years under my belt now to have seen this cycle happen.
Oh yeah.
From
Or
the
that with
80s.
Yeah,
with just
progressive rock
fads in
is a good
general, like
example.
in every area of life is kind of like that. They go through cycles. I remember I used to be really big into yo-yoing, which has nothing to do with music, but it was the same thing. It's like every 20 years that'll come back in, and all of a sudden I can, pull it out and be like, I can still do things that, are cool now.
It's
I was,
Never
I
cool.
awful at those.
timelessness to that stuff that nobody thinks about, and then here it is 20 years later or whatever.
Yeah, like the progressive rock stuff. Back in the day, they didn't call it prog. It was just art rock or whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it. And then by the 80s, it was all kind of passe. But then it's like a whole new generation came along that grew up loving those records and wanted to make their own music like that. So by the mid 90s, it was back on.
Well, we talked about legacy before. It's like with Rush, I mean, how amazing is it that, you know, friends of mine from high school have shared, you know, these were Rush heads that's, you know, like me for a while in high school. It was like all I listened to. And they've shared it with their kids. And now their preteen and teen kids are these massive, you know, Rush fans. And of course, there's other bands that they're introduced to as well. But how amazing is that? How the music just stays relevant through the
I think
generations.
it's just awesome. And you'd see this a lot. And, you know, when we were teenagers, we didn't see this when we went to see
No.
them. Everybody was our age. But, you know, going to see a Rush show in the last 15 years, it's like families there. You know, it's like dad loves this stuff and we love dad and we love it too. And we're all finally getting to see it together, you know, and
Yeah.
wow, you know, that look, you know, how cool.
I finally got to see Dream Theater a couple of years ago. A buddy of mine had gotten some tickets and invited me. I'd never seen him before.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And which is crazy. Just I always loved them and appreciated them, but I never really dove into them. And they're, you know, they've got probably one of the hugest, most loyal followings in the world. And when I saw them live, like I appreciated the recordings and saw videos and stuff, but when I saw them live, I really got it. You know, I was like, man, I totally understand this connection. And it's like the audience, and with so many of these great bands we're talking about, I mean, the audience, even though they're not on stage, they get to participate in the music. You know, it's this really cool sort of intangible connection, and the bands are not just like back to the audience and we're just going to rock out and do our thing. And I mean, you can tell that they are really, it sounds so cliche, but it's true. Like, you know, they really are feeding off of this audience-based energy, and it just goes back and forth and back and forth. And there's something about that kind of music, and if you want to call it the prog metal or whatever, there's something about the energy of that music that captivates a certain type of listener that just makes them a fan for life. And there's something they get from that music that they can't get from anywhere else. It seems it's really fascinating to me.
It is. Yeah.
I can only hope and pray that my music will, you know, would be like that for somebody out there. You know, that's probably the ultimate, you know, thing that for a writer.
It inspired me a lot. You know, like I think I found out about you because I was looking at schools to go to when I was in high school, and you know, you were at AIM at the time, and I wasn't, you know, quite old enough to have gone there while you were there. But I remember trying to get the drummer that I jammed with a lot to learn the parts, and we just try to do schizo all the time.
Oh, cool.
We just sit there and just try to do it, and yeah, it was a lot of fun just trying to do those bass sweeps. And then it was funny taking that lesson with you because I was making it harder than it was.
Yeah.
Like you're like economy of motion kind of thing, and I didn't realize. Yes, I didn't even think to do that. It was like, oh, okay. I was trying to do the sweeps across.
Your approach is perfectly logical because you were functionally sounding things the way that they would be sounded. And yeah, when we sat down, it was kind of like, it's not really cheating, but it's an economy thing. Like you said, like this is, you can accomplish that if you do this. And
made it a lot smoother because getting my pinky to try to hit the note on the other string just didn't really work.
Why make it harder than it needs to be, right?
Yeah.
Got a question in the chat room. Who would win in a drum battle between Jeff Sipe and Tom Knight?
Oh my God. Oh gosh.
Well, he'll get you in trouble, isn't he? He'll call you up like, hey, you know it's me, right? Tom will be like, it's me, right?
In that case, everybody would lose because if those two are playing together, it would probably throw the earth off of its rotational axis. So we
would all be screwed.
Those guys are two monsters. Tom's on my new record as well, and on one of the tracks. Tom is the quintessential drummer's drummer, you know, as well. But yeah, I can't answer that. It would have to be a draw. I mean, they would probably beat each other up and then shake hands or something. I don't know. There
you go.
I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky I've been able to play with so many great drummers in my lifetime. It's just what's so amazing about these like stylists, like I was referring to. These guys are stylists.
They are.
These players they all have their thing. And every time you hear it, you're like, oh man, that blows me away. And then you hear the other one, oh man, that blows me away. And it's fun celebrating everybody's awesomeness, with their personality and identity.
Absolutely.
Trying to
Another
find a
silly.
drummer that plays like Tom. I just gotta go back to Tom real quick. So on Schizo, that was like my introduction to him
Yeah.
because you had a couple of free downloads on your website back in the day, and so I was just had like a 30-second clip or a minute clip of it, I think, and it was just kind of like what he played there. I've never heard any drummer do like he had, like you said, he has a voice on there, and it's just kind of like I have yet to hear drummers kind of even imitate him.
Yeah.
Really, but what he played even on Schizo in particular.
Yeah.
Breaks and
Tom
all
is Tom is amazing because he's one of the few musicians that I've worked with and who's I feel like I really know his playing now, who was able to become a complete sponge and train himself through the emulation of other players to be able to learn every nuance of another drummer that he loved, like learn their playing, but still have his own voice and like evolve out of that, doing something that still just sounds like him.
Yeah.
And a lot of players, they like they become obsessed with a certain bass player, a certain drummer, a certain guitarist, and they go down the road of trying to learn every note that bass player or drummer or guitar player or whoever plays, and they never quite get off of that path. So when you hear them play, they sound like they're a prodigy of this other player. It's not a bad thing at all because it's impressive, but it's almost like you have to sort of step away from that to be able to go, okay, I've got this down. Where do I want to go now? Where do I take what I've done?
That's who they are. Who am I?
Right. And that's not an easy thing when you've been, diving into that stuff.
You play with so many drummers like that, and I wanted to kind of like ask about just getting all of them on, just like how you've had Marco Miniman on a track, you've had obviously a lot of things with you had Dave Weckl on some stuff, and all these other drummers. How did you go about like getting those guys on there? Was it because I know you're at AIM? Was it that a lot of them came through there? Like, how did you get in touch with them in the first place? Even
man, again, I'm trying to think if there's any exceptions to this, and I don't think there is. I knew somebody or was friends with somebody that knew a lot of these people, and so I had somebody that if instead of me just cold calling someone or emailing them, hey, I'm Adam and come play on this thing, it's like I'm sure they get inquiries all the time, and it's some of that sometimes you can get completely lost in the in the wash of all the inquiries, and if someone doesn't already sort of have the referral or the trust or whatever viability that they use to determine who they're going to work with, sometimes it can be harder to connect with folks. And in all of those cases, it was either musical circles that I was already hanging in or the fringe of that, or getting to know folks. It's all been that. Everything I've done has been a result of that. When I did the Dave Weckl transition tour, John Patitucci recommended me for that.
That's so cool.
I didn't get to talk to to Dave about that beforehand. Dave went to John and probably some other people too, looking for someone, hey, who could fill Tom Kennedy's spot, for this amount of time or whatever. And John was kind enough to put in a good word for me. And it's always been stuff like that for me. I've been very, very, very fortunate.
But it's also a small crowd of people that can do that. I was thinking about that. There's just a small crowd of like really, really good 6-string bass players that can handle fusion and that can handle just some of these other things too, like from fusion to Kenny Loggins to just any of the other things you filled in. I think I remember beginning of this, you're talking about getting pigeonholed, and I know we talked about that in a lesson at some point, and I did end up getting a 4-string after that, and I'm actually in the process of kind of letting go of the Warrior, which is kind of sad, but I haven't played it or gotten it fixed, and it started to hurt my wrist after a while. It's like that string spacing for me is just too much for the left wrist. But where was I going with that? Totally just lost my train of thought.
Pigeonhole.
but getting pigeonholed like that. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And I think you said when you moved to Nashville that you felt like a lot of people didn't know how, that you can be, and I think what it is like disciplined. You have to demonstrate to people that you really care about what they're doing, and they don't get that because they've had a lot of experience of people thinking I'm going to throw in what I know or
Yeah.
something. So how did you overcome that, or was it just the networking that overcame it?
With respect to Nashville, I had a couple people that made very polite diplomatic suggestions to me to not go out of my way to share, my instrumental releases or that kind of history with new Nashville scene musicians that I was working with, and their reason for that was, you just want to be careful if someone is going to gain a first impression from you, you don't want that to be skewed by someone else's impression of you based on what they saw or heard you do. And here's the bottom line. You can't control that stuff at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And yes, you can try to mitigate those types of things by deciding you're only going to be seen with a 4-string in town or whatever it is. You can try to do that. But the more that you network with people and the more conversation you have and the more you do a variety of musical situations, if you're connected, like, people they catch wind of what it is you do. Unfortunately, it's just human nature that if somebody hears you for the very first time in a context, whatever it is, in a jazz trio or on a country gig or playing upright or so, whatever it is, a lot of times that first impression, that's the memorable one for them. And that's in their mind. It's like, it's not a malicious thing. It's just, they kind of
categorized.
Yeah. They can categorize you as, oh, that's what that cat does. And it's not a demeaning thing. It's just where their mind goes. And so for me, it's like, when you mentioned the 6-string bass, there's a lot of producers out there that kind of hear with their eyes. And if you walk into a session with a 6-string bass, or, what some people jokingly call like a coffee table instrument, with these really figured woods, and it's really large and pretty, they make an assumption that you're going to come in, some people, not all, but they'll make an assumption that you're just going to overplay on everything and your tone is going to be like this nasal, mid-rangey thing. It's not going to work with the session. It's like, and you can kind of understand why somebody
happened before. I think it's because of other people.
Some
people ruin it for you.
Right. Either they've experienced it themselves, or in the context of like the video world or what they listen to, the only time they've ever seen a 6-string player has been in a fusion situation or something. So I was really protective, and I kind of tried to be the Nashville, fitting person. But, I'll be honest with you. After a couple years of struggling with the question upon first meeting people of like, hey, cool, yeah, nice to meet you. I do this. Cool. What are you, a studio player or are you a touring player, live player? And that kind of threw me. It was frustrating because I wanted to just say yes. I do both of these things. I've been doing both of these things for years. But that was when I first moved here. That was a lot of how people would.
They're different worlds up there, aren't they? Absolutely. I've noticed that from other people. They say the same thing.
It's starting to change. Like there's obviously generationally as certain players get older, players in the music industry game get older, and younger cats are coming in, like that's changing. And I really have seen it change, but it still was a very real thing. And after a couple of years, I just finally surrendered to it. I was like, you know what? I'm kind of tired of feeling like I've got to hide this and go out of my way to promote this. Like, I just want to kind of be myself. And yeah, maybe it meant someone didn't call me first for something, but it's okay because I got to do a large variety of things. And I don't really have regrets, but it's hard to navigate, You can't control people's perceptions, It's tough.
It's true. This is true.
Yeah. Like Sean's the prog guy, but he likes a whole bunch of other things besides progressive rock, right? Like a ton of stuff. He's just a musical encyclopedia, but some people would would say that it's more progressive, right?
I get
And
that every once in a while. Isn't
yeah.
this prog enough for you? And it's like, listen, I'm sitting here listening to a Leo Sayer album. Don't tell me I just got prog. Give me a break. You know, I just like great music played well and hopefully recorded well. That's kind of
Yeah.
I think most people that are music lovers, I think they're the same way. It's
yeah.
you might have a certain genre that doesn't satisfy you as much, but most people, if it's something is done well and it's like you can appreciate it.
I mean, I love great pop music. There's a lot of sophistication in that, groups like, like I mentioned earlier, Jellyfish or Beach Boys, XTC from the 80s,
Oh yeah,
fantastic bass
absolutely.
player, Colin
Yeah.
Mulder, awesome player. One of those wall guys. I don't know what it is, but I know a bunch of guys named Colin and they all play walls.
That's funny. Are
Colin
they all
from,
from the UK?
I think so, yeah, Colin from XTC, Colin from Camel, and who else was it? Oh, Colin from Porcupine Tree.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, he played a wall.
Yeah, they all do.
I didn't know that.
I
That
didn't
is
know that
funny.
either.
That is funny.
Oh.
Wow.
So, who are some of your favorite bass players, just kind of from the Atlanta area, Nashville, or just in your circle that you really dig?
Oh gosh. There were so many. Well, in Nashville, I mean, gosh, there's Nashville. What was it? Somebody said Nashville is one of those places where chances are the person delivering your pizza can play you under the table. It's like there's so many great players here. I mean, it's just crazy. But of course, Victor Wooten is here. Um, Gosh, John Billings is here. I love Michael Rhodes, and those are some of like the classic Nashville guys. Roy Vode is here.
Oh
Craig
yeah.
Nelson. Um, these there's just so many. I mean, I guess pretty much if you look up, if you look at like the Nashville albums and there's like the handful of players, like Jimmy Lee Sloas is another one. The handful of players that have played on so many of these great albums. I mean, they're all legendary.
Oh yeah,
It's insane.
thousands of sessions. Like they don't even remember them all by any means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in Atlanta, it's funny. My session experience in Atlanta was more active, based around like jingle work, radio, film, and TV, than it was album projects and custom projects. And there was a bass player named Allison Presswood, amazing bass player, who was like in that scene. And it wasn't until she moved to Nashville that I finally kind of had even a chance to sort of knock on the door of what was happening in that world. There was an amazing composer producer named Eddie Horst from Atlanta that he passed away unfortunately years ago, but he was one of the busiest people hiring session players for this stuff. And he had all kinds of accounts. And Allison, I looked up to her immensely, and what her and I'm trying to remember that she had kind of like a partner in crime, a guitar player, Pat Buchanan, another Nashville-based guitarist, session guitarist that used to live in Atlanta, and they were sort of like this dynamic duo. And I loved what they were doing, and obviously what Allison was doing. Allison moved to Nashville. Eventually, I moved to Nashville, so it was kind of cool than being in the same town as her. But there's another great bass player, Joe Rita, that lives in Atlanta. Russ Rogers, who was my instructor, a bass instructor.
I never heard that name in a while. Whatever happened?
Yeah, he was in Atlanta. He's in the DC area now.
Oh, okay.
He's posting on Instagram a lot about his Skype lessons.
Yeah,
he was
my first real like deep mentor as a player and a musician. I learned so much from him. And Dennis Kayaza was an upright guy in Atlanta. I don't know if he's still there or not. I didn't play upright then, but my gosh, I loved what he did. Yeah, man. I mean, we could sit here for hours if I went through
Sure.
the old phone book.
So
Speaking of upright, yeah,
yeah.
I know you just threw that in there. I just got to ask: are you gigging with the upright, or were you gigging with the upright much?
I had my very first gig on upright. Gosh, what was it? A couple months ago. I think it was in December. I got to play at my church. We did a handful of bluegrass things at the beginning of the set, and then I transitioned to electric after that. But I had been practicing it for a while, still practicing it. I'm not great on it or anything, but man, I have fallen in love with that. I'm telling you,
It's
it has been such
satisfying. There's something.
and the challenge of it too. It's like it kicks my butt, and then I walk away frustrated, and then I immediately want to just go back to it. It's just I've been practicing for a long time on this thing now, and I still drive myself into blister land. I've never been someone who builds up calluses,
Tough for me
particularly on
too.
my fingers. I don't know why that is.
I don't either.
So it's just, so if I play it a lot, I'll still get some aggravation. I have to take a break.
I have to make a rule like I can't play it within 3 hours of taking a shower, or my fingers are too soft and they'll get blistered.
I totally understand that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have understood that a year ago, but I do now.
Yeah.
Yeah, my friend Kevin Andrews is in the chat room. Have you ever heard of funk fingers? Those little drumsticks that Tony Levin sticks on his finger?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, he makes those.
Oh, cool. That is
Ever
awesome.
tried any of those out, Adam? They're a lot of fun.
I've never tried them. I'd love to try them. That is so cool.
Yeah, and he was asking if you had any thoughts on Jerry Peaks playing, because he was another local guy.
Oh yeah, Jerry. I mean, he's right in there in the list. Like I said before, I when I first started listening to the introduction, I mean, I was, of course, a fan of his playing. And what I liked about Jerry that I really related to, like, there was what's a word for good word? There was an accuracy, like a sincere accuracy to his playing that I really appreciated. And I loved his tone too, because it worked really well in the music that I heard him playing in. It had sort of like a forward nature to it, but it wasn't super pointy to the point of like it just stuck out like a sore thumb. But he was a very melodic player, and yeah, man, absolutely.
How would you compare his style to the guy that took his place, Dave LaRue?
To me, they're very different. And I love Dave too.
Oh, yeah, he's awesome.
Absolutely. I had Dave on the very first music instruction site I was a part of, Music Dojo, years ago. I hired Dave to be one of the bass instructors on that site. So I got a chance to work with him in that context. I was in charge of, I wrote my own classes, but I was also in charge of putting together all the curriculum from everybody and just, piecing together what they were doing. And we would work together to make these courses. But Dave's playing, to me, I actually saw Dave play live more than I did Jerry, but gosh, tonally they're very different. Dave had more of like almost the metallic nature to his tone. Like there was like more of a cutting nature to his tone in a good way.
Yeah, a good clank.
Yeah, exactly. Like you hit the attack. Like he had a more definitive attack to his playing, which I appreciated, because at the time I was listening to him, I kind of had that. I was trying to get that thing going on too. But I feel like they had a different. I don't know. They were coming from different places melodically, and their bass lines were definitely different. I don't know. Gosh, now you've got me trying to go back in time and dissect these things. They both had their own voice. I mean,
absolutely. And I got to throw in Andy West too, since they spent a lot of time playing his lines, but doing their own thing with them, and Andy had that kind of a rubbery sound almost.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it.
Out of an alembic of all things, usually those don't They're kind of clanky in a way.
Those are anti-rubber
I
usually.
know. So Howie, I don't know if he had some special pedal he was using or something, but yeah, he always had
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, that's
elastic kind of sound to his
a
playing.
great way to describe it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Cool. So you got any more questions, Steve?
I guess there was. I'm trying to remember. There was one more about the album. I guess you were mentioning Rush a lot, and I noticed you did the kind of
Oh yeah,
Neil
the tribute to Neil.
tribute.
Yeah,
About that.
Yeah.
I'm in the process right now. I'm trying to find a connection. Speaking of connection, I'm trying to find a way to get it um, to Alex and Getty. I would just love to share it with them, as you know, from the tribute perspective. You know, just because I think they would appreciate it. But that song, that song, when I started writing it, Neil was still with us, and I didn't really know what the trajectory was going to be at the beginning. It was just something that, again, another inspiration-based thing that I was working out primarily on guitar. And the song was about, I'd say 80% complete when I heard of Neil's passing. And it just kind of hit me like a lightning bolt at that time. This tune, I felt like it was supposed to, like, I felt like it was supposed to be written for him. And that was just what I felt, you know, convicted by, or with rather. And so that's when, you know, the name came up, you know, the professor, obviously, tip of the hat to his nickname. But that song, I'm so proud of that tune, the way it kind of came to pass, because it's something that the song's just not about me. You know, it's, even though I composed the tune, I love that whether someone's a fan of mine or not, if they're a fan of Neil or a fan of Rush or you know, that world, they have an opportunity to sort of participate in his memory with that. And I put a lyric video, or not a lyric video, what I'm saying, I put a video up on YouTube. It's got like a bunch of frames of Neil. I don't know if you all have seen it yet, but
No, but
I saw
make
it.
a
Yeah.
point to
I think
pick it up and
I
share
shared
it.
it with.
yeah, it's on my YouTube channel, and there's some cool pictures. Some of my favorites, I've got a couple of him, right? Like I'm a big gearhead. I love cars and restoring old cars and motorcycles and things that go fast. I've always loved that kind of stuff. And Neil
Even
was,
Jeff Beck.
yeah. He's got a little bigger budget than I do, probably, but Neil was a rider, and there's a couple pictures in the video of him posing with his, you know, next to his motorcycle. But so that's kind of cool.
That's awesome. So remind everybody again, where is the best place to get the new album? The World is
theworldisloud.com is pretty easy to remember. Okay. Or just my name.
Just for it. That's easy. Yeah.
Or just my name, adamnitti.com. They go to the same place. But yeah, if you're interested in a special edition signed CD button sticker package, you can still, if you don't wait too long, you can still get those at those addresses, web addresses. And then of course you could purchase digital or CD through Amazon or other music retailers. And then of course it's available on streaming resources as well, like Spotify and Apple Music.
Excellent. All right, well, go get it, folks. It's excellent. A couple more questions, and I guess we'll wrap it up here real quick.
Okay.
I got a couple more about the album.
Yeah, a couple of my obvious ones. What was the first album you remember buying with your own money?
Oh man, it was from this band, Kiss.
Excellent. All right.
Nice.
What was it? Was it that one?
But it wasn't. This is a Destroyer glass, which my wife reminded me that we had. And I thought it'd be, I don't know why, I thought it'd be apropos for the interview. I'm drinking my orange juice out of here. But yeah, it was Kiss Love Gun. And
I'll tell you a little side real quick. We did these tribute nights. We had a drummer that would throw that ending in every song.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I was like, one of these nights we're going to learn Love Gun and break into it. And we never got to do it, but
which drummer was that, by the way?
That was Fritzy.
It was Fritz. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was Fritz. That sounds like a Fritz move.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you say that Gene Simmons is better than people give him credit for as a bass player?
Um, from where I'm standing, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, here's the thing. It's like when I was a young tyke and I bought that album. I mean, it was rock and roll, and it was these dudes in costume blowing my mind, and all these toys and things that you could buy. That it was incredible. I was actually embarrassed to buy the record in front of, like, I made sure that my mom took me to get it because my dad was going to make fun of me. It's like guys in makeup. He was going to back then. It was kind of like they were. It's funny, like Kiss back then was super controversial. Of course, it was like, what is this band? What are they doing? Dressing up, those theatrical, spitting blood and all this other stuff, right? So
Suppose it would have been considered androgynous, but in hindsight, they really weren't at all.
no,
compared to the other bands at the time, even.
like I know that the cultural perspective now is very different, from
Yeah.
what it was back then. But my old school Italian dad, uh, it's like I didn't expect him to understand, rock and roll, let alone Kiss, who was like the edgiest of rockers back then. So my mom got it for me. But back then I wasn't listening to bass lines. This is before I ever started playing bass. Before I started, my very first instrument was classical piano. My parents got me on lessons because they saw I had an affinity for music really early on. Even before that, I just loved the sound of rock and roll, and I heard some song. It may have been Love Gun. I don't even remember at this point, but I remember when I saw that album. I was like, gotta have it. My gosh, my mom, if she would have, known, I guess, lyrically what was being discussed and some of that stuff, maybe she wouldn't have been okay with it. But it's funny now. I listening later on as a bass player after I started playing bass. I was listening to bass and I was like, especially the live records. Listening to Alive or Alive 2, Kiss Alive 2. I got so much of this on vinyl now. Of course, I had to go back in time. But you listen to the bass lines and, man, talk about some interesting movement and just, sweet syncopation here and there, and just the tone of the bass I love.
Oh, that big grabber, was that
Oh
the?
my gosh, man. So
Yeah.
yeah, man, I'm a Gene Simmons bass playing fan. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. I think he just never, gets any due, but I think he did just what was right for those songs.
Yeah.
And their music is just strongly rooted in early rock and roll.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny. We did a night one night where we did a Grateful Dead night, and the sound guy at the theater played the first two Kiss albums to warm up. And the Grateful Dead people were not having any of it. But I was like, this isn't a far cry from some Dead. And they looked at me like I was high as hell. And I was just like, but it's all they all kind of grew up on the same early rock.
Yeah, listen to the guitar riffs. I mean, a lot of that stuff is straight out of the 50s. It really is. There's that traditional lineage to what they were doing. Even in the melodies, there's a lot of throwback. Like I hear so much 50s melody and riffage, in that stuff today that I just didn't realize back then.
Yeah, it's like Chuck Berry in makeup,
Yeah, exactly.
Some of it, some of those Ace solos are right out of that book,
Yeah, no doubt.
So, what's some of the first concerts you went to as a teenager that blew your mind?
The first concert I ever went to was Genesis. Got to see Genesis.
Oh, that's a great way to start. What year was that?
It would have been their self-titled record that was yellow.
Okay, probably 83.
All was on it.
Yeah, 83.
Yeah, that was the first concert I was basically, I was allowed to go to with my friends.
That's about the age I started going.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That was amazing. Oh gosh, who else did I see? Got to see Boston.
Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
I got to see, of course, Rush. I got to see. There's so many I kick myself for not going to see that now you can't see anymore. But yeah, those stick out. I got to see. I remember going to like the early Lollapalooza stuff, which was
that's very good.
Which was incredible. King's X back in the day, like the early days. I
Oh
got some
wow,
King's
that
X.
would have been awesome.
Um,
And they were really cutting edge. I mean, they were doing that drop D thing a few years before the Seattle thing even came around.
yeah, yeah,
Just watching them on MTV on Headbangers Ball. Remember
yeah,
that? I was like, something different is afoot here because this has
yeah.
got more substance than most of the stuff I'm hearing on here. And
I
then,
remember too, like they had already had a legacy going back then, even, but seeing Cheap Trick, I got to see them multiple times,
oh
and
yeah, great, such a
that
great.
that was man, that was like gosh, what a lesson in just entertaining and showmanship and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
Tom Peterson with those 12-string basses and
Yeah,
stuff. I mean,
I
nobody
I,
hears those.
I got one of those eventually,
Nice.
and I about broke my back because it was so heavy. It was an amazing instrument. It was so neck heavy. You had all these tuning keys
Oh
that
yeah,
weighed
it's
more than the body.
probably 50 pounds of tuners on that headstock.
I remember seeing Def Leppard on Pyromania, or was it Pyromania or tour, or was it?
Hysteria.
It may have been Hysteria tour. That was
Yeah,
the
was
first
it in the
time.
round?
Yes,
Yeah,
that
yeah, I
was
think that was. I saw that.
that was cool. Back then, my buddies were all into like Bon Jovi and Cinderella. We saw them a bunch of times, but I mean, I love. It didn't matter what concert I saw. I just loved it. It was just a great time, and we sometimes the seats would be terrible, but we still had fun, man. And I
Oh
wanted to
yeah.
be a rock star, and so I'm just like looking at, watching with, all starry eyed, going, man, I want that to be me one day. It's just that was the goal that we all had. We wanted to play on big stages.
Absolutely. That was a great time. Great time.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, Stephen, you got any more questions?
I think I had. I'm trying to remember what they were. There was one or two about the album, and now I can't remember what they were. I know you went for more like aggressive feel and aggressive tone, and I like that. You definitely pulled more from like the Chris Squire, Geddy Lee, all those guys with a little more treble and mids, and it cut more. Oh, I remember what it was. A lot of those bass lines are like finger twisters. And I can just tell, I haven't tried to play any of them yet, but they just sound like really taxing. Which one do you think is like the one that's probably the most uh,
Without
difficult?
without love is the toughest
Without
one
love.
on the record.
Okay.
It's because it starts out with this repeated stacked fourths things that goes across adjacent string pairs down four whole strings on the bass, and that was, I don't know why. I should have never let that line stay the way it was, because it's going to be a nightmare to play.
Is that the one with the? Is that the one with where the keyboards kind of do it too, or am I
Yes,
confusing that
yes.
with okay?
Missing with the keyboard patch. That one's tough. And then the chorus has this like super fast like sextuplet thing in it too. So that one is pretty challenging. And gosh, I'm trying to think if
How are you going to avoid tendonitis when you actually get to play these out? So I was thinking it's either a really good warm up. It's like if you can play all these songs, you can probably play anything. Is what I was kind of thinking. Listening to that.
I don't know, man. It's I guess I'm gonna have to stretch a lot or something. But man, like I said, I'm determined. I'm determined to figure out how to make it happen. You know how it is, man. You've been playing a long time. It's like after a while, a lot of times when I record things like that, I haven't necessarily built up, like if I'm writing parts, I haven't necessarily built up the muscle memory like that might come from touring a tune that has me with the endurance already built in. But over time, you build up the muscle memory and endurance if you practice enough, and then it's not as big a deal. So, yeah, I mean, figure I played it once, I can play it again. Right? That's the attitude I'm going to have. So,
Do you ever have any issues with your hands? And do you do anything special to try and keep them in shape?
I went through a really scary period back around the time of my balance record, which was the late '90s, where I had this numbness shoot through my third and fourth fingers of my left hand one day while I was practicing. It was weird. It felt like a little electric jolt followed by numbness. And every time I would go to play, it would kind of happen. And it was pretty scary. And my first reaction was, oh, I've just kind of overdone it, so I'm going to stay off it. So I tried staying off it for a couple days, started to play, was still there. It's like, guess I need to wait longer. Waited a few more days, was still there, waited a whole week, and it was like sort of coming and going. And I was like, man, something's going on. And I took a full, after that, I was like, I'm not messing around with this. I took a full 2 weeks off. Came back to play, and it felt fine for, like a day or two, and then it started coming back. And so I went to an orthopedic, and they were kind of analyzing, and they said, well, take some more time off, take ibuprofen. Like, they're just sort of saying some really basic things. If it never goes away, it might be a surgery corrective thing. And I got really scared. I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, around that time, I was fortunate because I was playing in a band where the girlfriend of the drummer, she was actually a chiropractor that kind of specialized in musicians and helping them out with their, repetitive stress injuries. So the drummer said, hey man, you should go see her. And I was like, okay. So, and at that time, like, I didn't even really hardly know what a chiropractor was. It just seemed like, a back cracker. Like, I didn't really, like, what is that? What kind of stuff are they doing? I had no idea, but I was, I was open-minded. I was like, man, I'll try whatever if it helps. So I went, and she basically explained to me that the problem wasn't in my fingers, it wasn't in my arm. It was actually in my neck. And it was right now. I think she referred to it as a subluxation, some fancy term like that in my neck. Essentially what was happening was there was some pinching going on.
Was it from the strap? I got to ask because I have a similar thing going on. Okay.
It was aggravated by the strap. Just the weight, having, whatever, 10 pounds sitting there hours after hours, day after day was ultimately doing it. I wasn't doing anything to counteract it. Now I know I can counteract that stuff. But so she gave me chiropractic adjustments that lasted whatever. Maybe I did a few days a week for only was like a couple weeks, 3 weeks, month at the most. It wasn't that long. And it corrected itself. And it was like, okay. And then she just kind of explained to me the importance of staying on top of it, listening to your body, and kind of showed me different things that I could do to build up certain muscles or stay flexible, in certain ways. And so now what I do is anytime, like I've had many times where I felt that could be coming on again, but it doesn't scare me because I know what's going. And so, and then I've got somebody in Nashville that I go to that's real good. And it's the same thing. I do what I call just little maintenance visits, just like twice a year is all it takes. And the rest of it, I'm just taking care of myself. And I've never had a problem since, thank goodness.
That's good to know. That's good to know.
I want to kind of say a couple things more on this because one of the reasons I stopped playing a six string, one of the reasons I'm getting rid of the Warrior is because honestly, the angle, I think it's just, I have like trouble being able to play it without putting too much angle on my wrist, no matter what I try to do. One, I'm wondering how do you get around that angle, or is it just working other things out that balances it out?
So there's a couple answers to that. The primary answer is that, the problem that you're trying to avoid, that you're describing, it's if you had like anytime you have a sharp wrist angle, that's not necessarily the problem, even though it looks like it may be a problem. The problem is when you have a sharp wrist angle under tension, because that's when you start constricting things and squeezing tendons and all that other stuff. And that's where do enough repetitive stress, that's when you can have these injuries that they can start off at minor. Most of that stuff is reversible. If you just continue to ignore it and keep beating yourself up, then you could have, bigger problems. But my first task was to figure out, how do I counteract sharp wrist angles under tension? So the first thing I did was I found the height of the base on the strap when I'm standing that minimizes the angle equal amounts for both my left hand and my right hand. Because if the base is too high, the angle gets sharper with the right hand. And what happens is I was doing like what I call goosenecking. And so the wrist is coming over the top of the base with a real sharp wrist angle under tension. And so I'm plucking, it's like you're wearing the bass more like a necklace. It might feel easier to play with the fretting hand, but you pay for it here. You play with your bass too low. If you're trying to use like a classical guitar sort of, consistent plucking fretting technique, the wrist is going to bend now down here, going low. So how do you fix that? Well, you go higher. So I just found the middle ground there. And then to counteract the wrist angle, all I did was the first thing was to make sure the shoulders have to be relaxed. And then from there, if you want to push the elbow out from the fretting hand, that'll eliminate excess angle if you need to here by just doing this. So my shoulder is still relaxed, but I'm just pushing. I know it's weird kind of seeing this without a bass, but imagine just if I have to counteract it this way, no problem. And then I've got as flat a wrist as I want. It's so that was the first thing but the other thing that I think even had a greater influence for the fretting hand, like what you're describing, is when you're playing on low frets, your span gets wider, so it kind of forces your wrist forward, which forces a sharper angle under tension. So what I kind of taught myself to do was not let that wrist go forward, so my fingers I wouldn't hold a stretch as wide. What I do is when I'm playing, and you have to see this, I guess, on a bass, is I do what I call, it's like a reach for and land. So I'll get my hand moving in the direction, my thumb at the back of the neck slides, it guides my hand, and then I fall onto the fret that I need to, and then my wrist angle never goes. So I've got a little bit more motion going this way, but it alleviates all of the sharp wrist angle, and I can still play legato that way.
Because for me, I found that when I switched back to 4, it hasn't been as bad, although I still have some stuff that's now, it started in the same fingers that you're talking about, and now I feel it in my shoulder more than anything. So I think I just need to go to a chiropractor like that. But also, this is kind of a good segue. Are you still doing online lessons? Because that site, I know I took, I've joined for a short period of time, and it's really good. It's just a really good for bass players, a good resource, really good resource.
For the plug. So it's just AdamNittiMusicEducation.com, or you can also just go to AdamNittiMusic.com. That actually routes you there as well. It's a subscription-based library school, and that's where a lot of this the stuff that I teach conceptually and all that is up there. And then I've kind of maintained. I teach at Belmont University like one day a week, but I have students that study with me occasionally, either via Skype or Zoom privately. And again, if anyone is interested in that, they can get in touch with me through my website as well, or just adam@adamnitti.com.
Cool.
Excellent. Alrighty, well, I guess we better wrap it up. Let me tell everybody, if you have yet to subscribe, it's /Soul Night Live, SOAL Night Live, which stands for Story of a Life, because every one of these shows is biographical in nature. So yes. Coming up next week, the new Yes offshoot, Arc of Life, will be here, which includes Billy Sherwood, their bass player, Jay Shellen, the drummer that plays when Alan White's back is too out of whack to work. And Alan's doing much better now, but he did have some surgery for a while that kind of sidelined him for a bit there. And their singer, John Davison, is also on this, along with our good friend Dave Kersner on keys and Jimmy Hahn on guitar. So, and it's kind of like, I don't know, kind of 90s Yes, that more poppy strain of it, but with great playing and interesting arrangements. So we're going to get to the bottom of this, what this new record's all about and how they're different from Yes. Some people are saying, oh, this will be Yes in 5 years. Well, let's see what they think about that.
Yeah. Very cool.
Very cool. All right. Well, Adam, thank you so much for dropping by.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate you guys having me, and
it was a lot of fun.
Everybody that tuned in, thank you so much for being here with us.
You betcha.
Really great time.
Come back anytime.
It's always a pleasure.
We'll be back next week. Okay, y'all take care. Have a good week.
Yeah.